The water rises up from the water table to create this island in the middle, which perhaps is why it's given the name the Osireion. We have much later evidence of activity here in these flower of life symbols.
Behind one of Egypt's most famous temples, sunk below the floor of the desert, sits a structure the official history cannot quite explain: the Osireion. Its stones weigh as much as 100 tons each, fitted together without a trace of mortar, so tightly that even today you cannot slide a knife blade into the seams. The granite was hauled from a quarry hundreds of miles up the Nile, then lowered into a chamber that sits below the water table. And the experts who first dug it out took one look at that stonework and refused to believe the pharaoh. The textbook's credit ever raised it at all. The threshold of the afterlife. To understand what Nile was looking at, you have to understand where he was standing, because this is Abydos, and for more than 3,000 years, this was the most sacred ground in the country. It was the spiritual heart of the cult of Osiris, the god of death, of the underworld, of resurrection. Egyptians from every dynasty walked here on pilgrimage. They believed this was the one place where you could actually step across from the land of the living into the land of the dead. Kings of the very first dynasty, men who ruled around 3,000 years before the Common Era, were buried in the sand right here. One of those tombs the Egyptians themselves came to treat as the resting place of Osiris. Whatever Nile was staring at, it sat right on the doorstep of the afterlife. And here is the part the textbooks move past quickly. The structure he was digging out is called the Osireion. The official story of who built it and when does not actually rest on the evidence coming out of the ground. It rests on something much closer to convenience, and once you see how, you cannot unsee it. Right in front of the Osireion, towering over the whole site, stands the Temple of Seti I, a New Kingdom masterpiece dated to roughly 1,300 years before the Common Era. Nobody argues about that one. Every surface inside it is carved, painted, decorated. It holds the famous Abydos King list, the long carved run of royal names historians still lean on to put Egypt's rulers in order. It is refined, lavish, showing off, exactly what you would expect from the empire that raised it. The Osireion is nothing like it. 2 buildings, 2 minds. It sits behind the temple, lower down, reached by a long descending passage. Where the temple is buried in carving, the great hall of the Osireion is bare, almost aggressively bare. No painted scenes on the pillars, no hieroglyphs cut into the design when it was built. Just 10 enormous granite pillars, square and blank, holding up flat stone beams that weigh as much as 100 tons each. Everything about it is heavy instead of decorated. It feels less like a temple than like something far older that got dug up by accident and left standing in the daylight. Massive, silent, and completely out of step with everything around it. So, picture yourself standing between these 2 buildings, same site, a few steps apart, and they feel like they came from 2 different worlds. If that gap is the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, do me a favor and hit subscribe now. Because what the people who dug this place out actually concluded is the part the textbooks would rather you never heard. The stone that should not be here. Start with the granite, because the granite alone should stop you. Red granite like this does not exist at Abydos. It comes from Aswan, far to the south, a journey of hundreds of miles up the Nile. So, walk through what that means. Somebody cut 100-ton blocks free from the quarries at Aswan without cracking them, dragged them to the river, floated them downstream, hauled them across the floodplain, then lowered them into a sunken chamber, and set them with joints so tight you cannot slip a blade between them. The Egyptian record describes plenty of astonishing things: moving obelisks, dragging colossal statues, organizing labor on a scale that still stuns us. But the specific method for placing 100-ton beams at that precision into a pit below the water table is not written down anywhere. The official answer for how it was done is, in large part, an assumption. To feel how insane that weight is, hold it against the Great Pyramid. The average block in it weighs between 2 and 15 tons. The biggest stones, the granite beams roofing the king's chamber deep inside, run around 50 to 80 tons. And we rightly call those a supreme feat of ancient engineering. The Osireion's beams match or beat even those. And they were not hauled up the side of a growing mound of rubble that could double as a ramp. They were dropped into a cramped chamber at the water table, with every disadvantage a builder can have. And here is the detail that should really bother you. The Egyptians bragged. When a pharaoh pulled off something hard, he carved it into a wall in language built to outlast him. And the temple right in front of the Osireion is wall-to-wall bragging. But the Osireion itself, the genuinely impossible part, silence. The one achievement that should have been shouted from every surface is the only one nobody claimed, and the people who dug it out noticed exactly that. Which is where this stops being a story about stone and becomes a story about them. The men who dug it out. The people who uncovered the Osireion were not cranks. They were some of the figures who helped write the rules the whole field still follows. And what came out of the ground did not match what they had been told to expect. When Edouard Naville published his account in 1914, he did not hedge. He said flat out that this structure belonged to an age before the dynastic record even began, that it predated the Egypt of the pharaohs as anyone then understood it. This was not some outsider chasing a headline. It was an established Egyptologist working under the Egypt Exploration Fund, and the stone was not agreeing with the textbook. A decade earlier, Margaret Murray, documenting the same site under the supervision of Flinders Petrie, had felt the exact same pull. Two trained people, years apart, standing in the same hall, both quietly backing away from the easy answer. That is the detail that keeps getting left out. The people with their hands on the blocks, measuring the joints, standing in the groundwater with the dust still on them, those were the ones least convinced by the date that would eventually get stamped on the place. Their doubt did not come from theory, it came from touching the thing. They could see the inscription sitting awkwardly on the stone, like a name scratched onto something that was already old long before the hand that scratched it showed up. But doubt does not survive long against consensus. By the 1920s, a cleaner story had taken over, and it had authority behind it. The Osireion was handed to Seti I, the pharaoh whose temple happened to stand right in front of it. Naville and Murray were not proven wrong. They were just set aside, folded into the footnotes while the tidier date moved to the front of the book. And the man who put it there was not sloppy. His case for the later date is genuinely clever. Clever enough to have held for a century. It is also exactly where the whole thing starts to come apart. The defender's answer. Give the man his fair hearing, because his argument is smarter than you would guess. He did not pretend the Osireion looked like normal New Kingdom work. He admitted the obvious, that it was megalithic and stark and archaic. And then he flipped that strangeness into his proof. The Osireion looks ancient, he argued, because it was built to look ancient. Seti, raising a monument to the god of death and resurrection, reached back across the centuries and copied the heavy, primordial style of the deep past on purpose. The plainness, the crushing weight, even the water pooling around the central platform. A deliberate nod to the primordial sea the Egyptians believed the first dry land rose out of. It is a brilliant piece of theater. A king dressing his own symbolic tomb in the costume of a far older age. It is an elegant theory. It has held the field for nearly a century, printed in textbooks and on the signs at the site. But elegant is not proven. And the second you press on it, the same cracks open up that bothered the people who dug this place out in the first place. Where the theory breaks. Start with the inscriptions, the very marks the whole attribution hangs on. Yes, Seti's name is there. But look at where and how. Not woven into the design from the start. Not planned alongside the architecture the way every inscription in the temple out front so obviously is. It shows up instead on surfaces that were already finished, smooth, meant to stay blank, cut in afterward, in spots that feel chosen for convenience rather than meaning. And that matters because a carved name does not tell you who built a wall. It tells you who wanted to be associated with it. If Seti's masons had raised the Osireion from the foundation up, you would expect his titles planned into the bones of the thing, wrapped in the dense relief that defines his temple a few steps away. Instead, the inscriptions read like a signature, scrawled across a canvas somebody else already painted. Then there is the problem the theory can never get past. The problem of the single instance. If Seti's architects really could quarry 100-ton blocks, float them the length of the country, and set them with joints a blade cannot enter, then where else did they do it? Skill like that does not show up once and then vanish. It leaves a trail, in other commissions, in repairs, in the same crews turning up on other jobs. And across the entire record of the New Kingdom, there is nothing else built like the Osireion. Those temples are magnificent, but the method is completely different. Smaller stones, mortar where it helps, almost nothing in common with the megalithic silence behind Seti's wall. The flooding tells the same story. If the water was sacred and intended all along, why pour that obsessive precision into joints doomed to sit underwater forever, where no eye could ever admire them? Work fitted to the tolerance is meant to be seen, in light and air, and the water is not even fixed. Its level has climbed sharply in recent decades, ever since a great dam upstream lifted the water table across the region. The drowned lower courses you see in photos today may be a modern condition, forced onto a structure built to stand dry. And then there is the scale. The doorways rise well past 12 feet. The passages are wide. The beams hang at heights that shrink a person standing under them down to nothing. The usual explanation is grandeur, size cranked up to signal majesty. Perhaps. But it is a strange kind of grandeur, one whose proportions seem fitted to something the standard story cannot name. The evidence is leaving. Stack all of it together and the clean textbook picture starts to dissolve. A structure that looks ancient and may in fact be ancient. Inscriptions that read more like a later claim than an original plan. A construction method with no siblings in the century it is credited to. Workmanship built for dry light, not standing water. No single piece of that overturns the consensus. But put them side by side, and the consensus stops looking like a conclusion and starts looking like a convenience. A date chosen because it closed a question the building itself has never stopped asking. And remember, long before any of this modern arguing, a Greek geographer stood at Abydos in the 1st century before our era and described the structure as already ancient. He did not think to credit it to Seti at all. The hard part is that the evidence is walking out the door. Every year the water climbs higher, swallowing another band of the lower courses, dissolving the exact joinery that might settle the argument, carrying off the proof before anyone with the authority to look has decided to look honestly. So, let me hand it to you. If the inscriptions came after the walls and the proportions fit no one we can easily name, then who do you actually think raised those 100-ton stones at Abydos? And what were those oversized halls really built to hold? Tell me in the comments. And subscribe if you want to stand inside the next impossible structure with me. Then tell me which one it should be.